Marvin Gaye was an American singer and songwriter. He helped shape the sound of Motown in the 1960s. With a string of successes, he earned two nicknames, Prince of Motown and Prince of Soul. But behind his soulful image led a troubled man that started early in his life. Marvin Pence Gaye Jr. was born in Washington, D.C. on April 2nd, 1939. His father, Marvin Gaye Sr., was a minister, and his mother, Alberta Gaye, was a domestic worker. Gaye was the second oldest of four children and two half-brothers. A brother from his mother's previous relationship and from his father, extramarital affairs. Gaye grew up with conflict and confusion. He grew up in a Pentecostal church, listening to church music and singing in his dad's church. The church is where Marvin started his passion for singing. He also mastered the piano and drums at a young age. His father was strict and would abuse and beat him and his siblings if they did not obey. Gaye's dad was a cross-dresser. His dad was a minister by day and a cross-dresser by night. That confused Marvin, and he was ashamed of his dad and his last name, which he changed to Gaye with an E.
Marvin's family were quite different because his father belonged to this church called the House of God, which was a black holiness church, but with a rather unusual twist because it had a very strong emphasis on the Old Testament, and it was a mixture of sort of Christianity and Judaism in some ways.
I think we were as tough as any kids, but we had a religious father, so we couldn't we couldn't start fights, and there was no cussing. And we went to church on Saturday. Our last name was Gaye. You can imagine.
His father was very strict with the kids, about when they could go out, when they had to be in, what they could wear. The girls weren't allowed to wear makeup, and he had very.
With all the conflict in the home, Marvin never wanted to be home. He didn't like the way his father conducted his life. Marvin was close to his mother. She was his protector and always encouraged Marvin to pursue his career.
Years, my father was a very strict disciplinarian. I think one of the problems that my father had with my brother was that he didn't realize that Marvin was a free spirit. He didn't like to be told what to do.
He would always tell Marvin that, he didn't know where he came from. I don't know where you came from, boy. You're not mine. There's too much of the devil in you.
His father was a strange man by any measure. He was a man who wore female clothing. He's a man that Marvin was ashamed of.
Marvin, seeing his dad, who on one hand was this charismatic preacher and on the other hand was a cross-dresser, was a source of great confusion for him. And when Marvin looked for paternal love in his childhood, what he received was not only scorn, but intolerance and violence.
My father was a man of spare the rod, spoil the child. And he'd never spared the rod.
In 1956, at the age of 17, Gaye dropped out of high school and joined the Air Force as a basic airman, but was discharged after a year.
Torn between his sacred obligations and his secular aspirations, Marvin escaped, dropping out of high school and joining the Air Force at 17.
I did a horrible stint in the Air Force. It was terrible. I got an honorable discharge under general conditions in Section 214. Something about unable to adjust to regimentation and authority and good riddance or something. I don't know.
After his discharge, Marvin sang with several groups, and they would sing doo-wop music around Washington, D.C. Marvin could not sing this type of music in his home because his dad felt he was leaving his calling. In the late 50s, while singing with a group he created called the Marquises, he met Harvey Fuqua, who was in a group called the Moonglows. Marvin approached Harvey and asked if he could help their group out. Harvey agreed, and the group performed with the Moonglows. But in 1960, the group disbanded. Gaye relocated to Detroit with Harvey and was a session musician with the Tri-Fi Records. Gaye performed one night and Berry Gordy was there. Impressed by Gaye's performance, he bought Gaye out of his contract with Tri-Fi and Marvin signed with Motown. In June of 1963, Gaye married Anna Gordy, Berry Gordy's sister. Gaye was 21 years old and Anna was 36 years old. They adopted a son, Marvin III. That gave Marvin a seat at the Motown table, but Marvin was very rebellious. He wanted to do things his way and not Motown's way. He and Berry would disagree a lot and even some semi-violent at times.
Motown.
I was a bit spoiled. I was a prima donna. I was the president's brother-in-law, and I was rather ridiculous about things that the other acts were doing. I don't know. I seemed to sort of enjoy being able to say, I don't have to do that. You guys do that, you know. I don't have to do that.
After 2 years with Motown, his first hit was Stubborn Kinda Fella. Despite the conflicts with the company, Marvin turned out a string of hits, and by 1965, he became the smooth and sexy, acceptable face of black pop. Marvin was a true recording artist and was happy in the studio. Marvin had performance anxiety, and in the mid-1960s, Marvin was Motown's biggest star, and Motown was the most successful black company in the world. Marvin still struggled to please his father.
Marvin would buy his dad a Cadillac. He would send him all kinds of gifts. I mean, he would do all kinds. His father would accept them. He would never turn them down. But it was just the idea that he just would never come to grips and say thank you or smile or none of that. He just wouldn't do it, you know. Why? I'll never know.
Marvin sang duets with other artists, but in 1966 he teamed up with Tammy Terrell. Ain't No Mountain High Enough, and the recordings that followed made Marvin and Tammy the most popular duo of their time. Despite all the success, his marriage to Anna was in a disarray. He recorded Norman Whitfield's I Heard It Through the Grapevine, which became Motown's biggest best-selling hit in Motown history. It sold over 5 million copies. Then tragedy hit in October of 1967 when Tammy collapsed in Marvin's arms on stage. She was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Unfortunately, Tammy passed away in 1970. After the death of Tammy, Marvin was traumatized for the rest of his life and went into a deep depression. He did not perform for 3 years and began to use drugs heavily and became very paranoid.
After Tammy's demise, Marvin didn't sing for 3 years. So I can say that he genuinely loved Tammy. He suffered when she died.
Heartbroken, vowing never to perform again, Marvin retired to his home to a period of depression and self-reflection.
He would get up in the early parts of the morning, day, or whatever it was, and he could keep his pajamas and robe on all day long. And if he changed clothes, he would just change from one pair of pajamas to another pair of pajamas. I mean, he could stay in his house. And his thought was, I got enough food in here. I got enough to drink. I have enough people that come by and visit me.
It took him a while to realize what was happening, even when we were recording The Last Days. I think he was so protective of her and always trying to make her comfortable.
Between 1969 and 1970, he started thinking about all the unrest in America His brother would call him from Vietnam and would tell Marvin all his horrific experiences. He wanted to write music to touch the soul of men. Marvin wanted to sing his innermost feelings in his music. During that time, Marvin wanted to release What's Going On, and Barry thought the song would ruin Marvin's image. Marvin told Barry, "If you do not put it out, I will never perform or make any music again."
And Marvin said, "Well, if you don't put this out, I'm never recording anything else for you again, so..."
What's Going On remains one of the largest ranked albums, reaching number 6 on the Rolling Stone list and reaching number 2 on the Hot 100. This turned Marvin into an icon. And on May 1st, 1972, the mayor of Washington, D.C. made May 1st Marvin Gaye Day at the Kennedy Center, which was the first time his father had ever saw him perform. Marvin would later say that he felt that was the only time he made his father feel proud.
Life, he was continually haunted by his dad's voice, telling him, "Where's your church? Why are you singing the wrong kind of music?"
Marvin brought home an attaché case with $1 million in it. And when he threw it on the bed and said, "What do you think now, Father?" He says, "I still say, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?"
What's Going On also gave Marvin the financial freedom to move to Los Angeles. He teamed up with producer Ed Townsend and recorded Let's Get It On in 1973. It became Marvin's second number 1 hit on the single and album chart Top 100. During a recording session, he met 16-year-old Janice Hunter.
But during the recording sessions, the song took on a new meaning when Marvin was introduced to teenage family friend Janice Hunter.
While singing Let's Get It On, Jan had gone to the bathroom, taking her hair out of pigtails and put a little lipstick, and suddenly grew to be a young lady instead of a little girl with pigtails. You know how you do that, don't you? And he said, "I want to get it on," which meant he was very serious about seeing Jan. It just wasn't a passing fancy that he really liked her. And so after the session, I said, "Marvin, if you want to take her out, you're going to have to go and ask her mother."
After 2 successful albums, Marvin renegotiated his contract with Motown, demanding and getting his own studio and production company. That studio was his pride and joy. And having a lot of money, being in Los Angeles and meeting Jan, he became more hedonistic. In the beginning, Marvin would smoke a lot of marijuana and then later started doing cocaine. Marvin's increasing drug use and relationship with Janice had led Anna to sue for divorce and wanted alimony. Marvin and Janice had 2 children, Nona and Frankie Gaye. Marvin could not pay up, was not paying up, and not showing up for court. Marvin's lawyer suggested he make a double album called Here, My Dear for the alimony payments, and Anna would get the proceeds. By 1977, his drug habit began to destroy all his closest relationships. He would force Janice to be with other men.
Marvin liked danger, really. He liked to put himself in dangerous situations, and so he started to get Jan to. He would force her to go with other men. I think almost to torment himself. If things were going well, he had to destroy it in some way.
His life at best was in disarray, his personal life. I imagine he was going through emotional traumas that those of us who've been there and done that, we go through.
To us, we say, well, it's this great guy who sings, and what a social thinker, and he's so eloquent. But to himself, it's Like, oh, am I sexy or am I evil? Do I want one woman, many women? Do I even want a man? I mean, you know, I'm so fraught. Give me a drug.
In October of 1977, after divorcing Anna, he married Jan, but it was too late. Their marriage was overwhelmed by drugs, debt, and infidelity. Their marriage only lasted 2 years. Marvin's extravagant lifestyle, expensive drug use, and failed investments, his career went into a downward spiral. Bankrupt, running from Anna's lawyers, and estranged from Jan, Marvin set up shop with his 4-year-old son, and the company he was keeping was not good company.
Marvin's company were drug pushers, pimps, hangers-on, basically leeches who wanted to hang around him because he was Marvin. He lived on bread, Marvin did. His son ate ice cream all day because Marvin just couldn't keep it together. I mean, he was like a gypsy, basically, and in a very, very bad state.
Jeffrey Kruger took Marvin on a tour in London, but Marvin was not the same Marvin when he got there.
He was wearing a crumbled jacket. He'd obviously slept in it. He was wearing a tie around his neck with no collar. He really looked like he'd come out of the rag bag, and my heart just went, and I thought, no, he's not going to be able to do it. This is not Marvin. The cocaine was making him sweat. He was getting disorientated. He would say he was going to sing a song that was made famous by him and Tammy Terrell, and it turned out to be one with Diana or one with Kim. But the audience loved him. I mean, he was Marvin Gaye, and he was the soul man, the icon, the black icon, and they forgave him anything, particularly the women.
After the tour, he was supposed to go back to the States, but stayed in London. While in London, he was a 41-year-old fallen star engulfed with drugs, sex, and another deep depression. He stayed in London because he was running from all his problems at that time.
Span, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. It's a result of 3 or 4 things. One thing was I was undergoing 2 divorces at the same time, which can be rather traumatic by itself. And then I was in bankruptcy. All my property had been confiscated, and there was a lot of money and a lot of property, millions of dollars, and that was rough, leaving me penniless. And then I was really having quite a political upheaval with Motown at the time, and we weren't getting on at all. And I was really broke, and things didn't look too good, so I was stuck in this forest, and I couldn't see. Oh yeah, I didn't tell you. I owed the government $4 million too, so that's enough to leave the country, you know.
You owe the government $4 million.
I forgot to tell you that. I just want everybody to know why I got the heck out of Dodge.
Then comes the guy Freddie Kooser, who was an entrepreneur in Belgium. He was a fan of Marvin and heard what was going on with Marvin. He told Marvin he was going to get him out of London to get his life back on track. Marvin went to Belgium with Freddie.
I had told him very clearly, when you come to Ostend, there will not be all this kind of nightlife and drugs and etc. There's only the natural kicks here.
I was knowing Freddie was bringing him over one day, so I was preparing some nice soup, put some flowers in the apartment and everything. When they came, he liked it, Marvin. He was surprised, some people cared for him.
Marvin began running on the beach, keeping himself in shape, and slowly began to clean up his act. He continued to write music and sing while in Belgium. That is where he wrote Sexual Healing. And after 3 years, Marvin moved back to the States, and Sexual Healing was released with CBS Records, which became Marvin's biggest career success. spending 10 weeks at #1 on the Hot Black Singles and becoming the biggest R&B hit of the 1980s according to the Billboard stats. Marvin seemed to have found a balance with his music, and in 1982, Marvin received a Grammy for Sexual Healing. Marvin was at the peak of his career and started touring again, but fell back into his drug addiction. He was spending every dollar he earned on drugs, paranoid and thinking someone was trying to kill him.
Once he's out on the road, all discipline goes. 2 dates into the American tour, Marvin collapsed on stage from exhaustion. Again, he relied on drugs very heavily.
Things had changed. The gleam had gone out of Marvin's eye. And he just wasn't taking care of any business now.
He became paranoid because he thought people were trying to kill him. He insisted that his immediate crew carried guns, which they did. Marvin carried a gun.
He told me he was surrounded by evil. And I told him, I said, Marvin, why don't you go back to Belgium? And he said, you really think so? And I said, remember, Marvin, how you used to tell me that you had never felt so free? And he said, yeah. I said, go back to Belgium.
But they patched him up, put him back together again, and he finished the tour. But he exposed himself on stage. He was late for performances. He was rude on stage. I mean, the whole thing was a sham.
In August of 1983, Marvin gave his final performance in Los Angeles. Addicted and exhausted, he returned to his parents' home in Los Angeles. When Marvin returned home, the leechers returned too. People close to Marvin would shoo them away, but Marvin accepted them.
He came home. He wanted peace. And everybody was pulling at him, left and right.
When Marvin returned, the hangers-on returned too. Though people close to him tried to shoo these people away, Marvin eventually sought them out, or at least accepted their overtures.
And they would come night and day. And I think that's what upset Father, was the traffic. They had no respect for Marvin's father or his mother. They would come at 2 o'clock in the morning. The girls would be in the garden screaming, Marvin, let me in. There was a lot of tension in the house, and it was building within Father because he seemed to be fighting with Mother more. And then Marvin was building up too because he was getting sicker and sicker.
He's addicted out of his mind. The drugs are making him absolutely kooky. He's paranoid. He believes everybody's out to get him.
Just things that came out of his mouth that you knew were not Marvin.
On April 1st, 1984, the day before his 44th birthday, he had an encounter with his father. It was common knowledge throughout the household that if Marvin ever touched his father would shoot him. Gaye had bought his dad a gun for protection weeks earlier. His father was having an argument with his mother, and Marvin could not stand by and let his mother take the verbal abuse his dad was giving her. That led to an argument between Marvin and his father. They began pushing each other, and Marvin just hit his father. His father went and got his gun and shot Marvin at point-blank range, and as he was slumped down on the floor, he shot him a second time. Marvin was pronounced dead when he arrived to the hospital.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mary Hart.
And I'm Ron Hendren. Soul singer Marvin Gaye, whose career spanned over 25 years, including the birth of the Motown sound to the 80s, was shot to death yesterday in Los Angeles. Dick Shoemaker reports.
69-year-old Marvin Gaye Sr. was taken to police headquarters in downtown Los Angeles last night after being booked on suspicion of murder in the death of his son. Marvin Gaye was visiting his parents' home here in Los Angeles. There was a family argument. The singer was shot in the chest. A little while later, Marvin Gaye died.
Marvin Gaye Sr. armed himself with a handgun and fired several shots, wounding Marvin Gaye Jr. Marvin Gaye Jr. was taken to California Hospital where he was pronounced dead from gunshot wounds at 1 o'clock this afternoon.
What can I say? It is a tragedy. I love Marvin, and I'm very sorry what happened.
Family and friends were shocked and wept openly in the wake of the killing, and a crowd gathered in front of the Gaye home. Police say the singer and his father started arguing over insurance matters Saturday night, resuming the argument Sunday. Marvin Gaye Sr. is expected to be arraigned sometime this week.
Marvin's death was a big blow to America. People close to Marvin said he was spiritually drained and was ready to go. Marvin's father was initially charged with first-degree murder, but his charges were later dropped when tests found a brain tumor in his head. Frankie Gaye, Marvin's brother, said Marvin and his father were both victims.
I mean, it's from my heart. I wish I could go back. I wish I could never. I just really, it's killing me. I'm sorry. It's something I regret. I regret it always until I die.
But why did he have to shoot Marvin the second time? Why could he just not have shot him the first time? Marvin went down. Why did he have to get up and go over to Marvin, point blank, and go bang again? Why?
Two victims. Marvin and my father.
Rest in peace, Marvin Gaye Jr., April 2nd, 1939 until April 1st, 1984. And if you made it to the end of this video and enjoyed the video, I ask you to give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell so you will be notified when I upload another video. And comment down below and tell me what you think of this video. Thanks for watching.